Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon, and I am still waiting for my Seder. Today, we are talking about Curtsies and Conspiracies by Gail Carriger. This is the second book in the Finishing School series, kind of the sequel to Etiquette and Espionage, and I gotta say, I am completely obsessed with this series. Alright, so let's just dive right into it. So we start off with seeing Sophronia take her 6-month review, and we learn that she receives the highest marks in the history of the school. This in turn makes all the other debuts shun her, and they all refuse to talk to her. While she was taking the test, it was being administered by a machine that had a little valve on it that looked remarkably like the prototype from the first book, so naturally Sophronia steals it. When she goes to tell Soap and Viev about the events of the day, they agree with her that they think her marks were exaggerated so that she would be isolated, but they have no way to prove this. And also, Sophronia gives Viev the valve so that she can discover what it is. Now, the school is headed towards London to witness the first ever float through the ether. And there is a lot of speculation to why the school is actually going there and why they have to see it in person. There will be more on this later. Suffice to say, Sophronia does do some sleuthing to try to get to the bottom of this. In honor of this, some boys from Bunsen's are on board, as well as Professor Shrimpdiddle, who, as we know, is a personal friend of Professor LeFou's. Among the boys include Dimity's brother Pillover, Lord Dingleproops, and the dark-haired boy who we learn is named Felix. And Felix begins flirting shamelessly with Sophronia, which in turn greatly puts her off. Naturally, while all the boys are on board the ship, they attend all of their classes with the girls, all except for the ones taught by Captain Nile and Professor Braithwaite, that is, because, of course, Bunsen's is allied with the Picklemen instead of the Supernaturals. So, while in one of the lessons with Captain Nile, Sophronia learns that there is a lot of unrest between the werewolves and the vampires due to this flight test, and that the werewolves think that the vampires are going to try to gain more power by using this test to lengthen their tethers. Now, tethers are very important when it comes to supernatural power. Your power is only as great as your tether. If your tether snaps, you could be permanently damaged. So being able to fly through the ether could give you untold power. So this is kind of a shock to Sophronia because she doesn't really understand why it seems like such a problem, but as we'll later learn, Professor Braithwaite is sort of at the center of this flight test. So later on, Sophronia listens in on Professor LeFou and Shrimpdiddle and discovers that they're building something that probably has to do with the flight test. Later, we find out that it's actually a suit that is going to protect a vampire from their tether snapping and from the ether currents. She also discovers that Monique can roam the halls at night in the restricted areas whenever she pleases, and Sophronia is determined to find out why that is. Speaking of Monique, she receives word from her parents that she is going to be having her coming out ball once they arrive in London. This is, of course, because Monique is not going to be permitted back into the school due to her, let's just say, attitude. And of course, everyone wants to be invited to this ball. Well, all except for Sophronia, who really just does not care. We also learn that all the girls were actually under orders from Lady Lynette as part of their exam to ostracize whoever got the highest marks on their review. So Dimity, Sidheg, and Agatha decide that loyalty is way better than acing some test and come clean to Sophronia and become her friends again. Just in time, too, because now Sophronia can send Agatha undercover to spy on Monique to learn more about why she can roam the halls at night. While trailing Monique one night, Sophronia observes her being fed on by Professor Braithwaite, which can only mean that Monique is none other than Professor Braithwaite's mysterious drone. This is why she is able to roam the halls at night and pretty much do whatever she pleases. So as they approach London, they decide to set down on the ground for a little while they take up more water. Now, while on the ground, Sophronia and Dimity are attacked by thugs in the woods. And of course, Lord Mersey, aka Felix, comes to their rescue, and I'm sorry, I'm sure everyone's gonna want to hang me or whatever, but I am completely in love with Felix. I can't help it. Every time he is in a scene in the book, I just swoon. So I'm very partial to Felix. I know everyone wants her to be with Soap, but I just can't help it. I love Felix. Anyway, sorry, got off on a tangent. We find out that Dimity and Pillover are kind of like at the center of this huge conflict and that people are trying to kidnap him. So, of course, now Sophronia is going to try and find out who this person could possibly be, because Sophronia, as we know, is always going to try to get to the bottom of everything. Once back aboard the ship, we discover that the small prototype is called a guidance valve, and it uses ether currents to transmit protocols to mechanicals, and it of course works better when actually in the ether. This device is very crucial to the test flight and will ultimately make or break how it goes. So of course, Sophronia gives Viev the device for further inspection and to learn as much as she can about it. It is at this time that Viev informs Sophronia that she has to go to Bunsen's. As we know, Viev has always wanted to go to Bunsen's, but of course can't because she is a female. So, in exchange for Sophronia getting Professor Shrimpdiddle fired from the school, Viev is going to teach her how to service Bumbersnoot by herself and give her all of her gadgets. Sophronia is a little wary about this, for she's not sure if she wants to get a teacher fired, but she does go along with it so that she can help her friend. Her first opportunity to sabotage Professor Shrimpdiddle comes while the girls are having their fortunes read during their visit to Mademoiselle Geraldine. And Sophronia decides to bribe the fortune teller so that she will give Professor Shrimpdiddle a bad fortune. And this bad fortune is greatly interpreted by Professor Shrimpdiddle that a supernatural is out to get him and leaves him very paranoid. As she tries to cement this thought even further, Sophronia sneaks into Professor Shrimpdiddle's chambers one night and dyes his neck so that it looks like he's been bitten by a vampire. However, upon leaving, she is caught by the fortune teller, Madame Spatuna, and she says that in exchange for keeping quiet, Sophronia must give her Bumbersnoot for 3 weeks. So, to ensure that Sophronia gets him back, she has Viev put a small explosive in him that will be emitted in 3 weeks' time, just for a little extra insurance. Backtracking a little bit, we have Sophronia discovering that Dimity's parents are actually the ones who created the prototype, which is why people are trying to kidnap Dimity and Pillover. Now, we're not quite sure who could be behind the kidnappings because her mother is a progressive and her father is a pickleman, so it couldn't possibly be one of them, but that is still greatly up for interpretation. Sophronia's suspicions only grow, however, when Monique invites Dimity and Pillover to her coming out ball, which is greatly out of character. And of course, Dimity manages to get the rest of the debuts invited as well. So obviously Monique has some ulterior motives, and she could possibly be working for the kidnappers. Skipping forward a little bit, once they arrive in London, they prepare for the flight test. And before the preparations get underway, they are visited by the Queen's pet vampire, and this leads Sophronia to think that the school's patron could possibly be him, which would mean that all graduates of Mademoiselle Geraldine's are members of the Shadow Council. Just, some food for thought. So, back to the dirigible test. All the girls are taken off the ship because the ship is going to accompany Professor Braithrope up to the ether because he is going to be on the flight. And naturally, Sophronia sneaks back on the ship so that she can see exactly what happens. As we find out, Professor Braithrope uses the metal suit that was designed by Professor LeFou and Shrimp Diddle so that he can be protected. And once up in the ether, he kind of goes crazy. Like, he just starts convulsing and moving all around, and we don't really know if he jumps or if he falls, but either way, he tumbles off the ship and starts hurtling towards the ground. Now, the guidance valve was installed on his suit so that if he were to fall, it would send a message down to the Sooties and they would know to send the ship down with him so that his tether wouldn't snap. But his valve was tampered with and no message can be sent. So by the time Sophronia gets down there and tells them that they need to start moving down so that they can save him, it's already too late and his tether does snap. Once on the ground, we discover that not only is Monique one of his drones, but so is Professor LeFou. And Sophronia tells her that she thinks Professor Shrimpdiddle tampered with the valve, all in attempts just to get Vive into the school, but Professor Shrimpdiddle actually did tamper with the valve because he became so paranoid about Professor Braithrope's presence. This, of course, leaves Sophronia very guilty because she feels like it's her fault that Professor Braithrope was harmed, but we do find out that even if the valve hadn't been tampered with, there was no way to save him because of what the ether currents were doing to him. So Professor Shrimpdiddle is, of course, dismissed for his actions, which does mean that Sophronia held up her end of the bargain no matter how guilty she may feel. Later that night, the girls and the few boys attend Monique's coming out ball, and of course, many things start happening. We learn that Felix wishes to properly court Sophronia, which I personally think is great, but not everyone may agree with me. And we also see that Dimity and Pillover have vanished. So Sophronia does the rudest possible thing and leaves Felix on the dance floor alone for the second time, might I add, and rushes out to go and find them. Once she arrives outside, she sees the Westminster dandy from the first book who was trying to get the prototype from Monique, and we discover that he's actually part of the Westminster vampire hive, and that they are the ones behind the kidnapping, and they want the guidance valve technology. So, of course, Sophronia, Soap, Sid Hay, and Captain Nile attempt to infiltrate the Westminster hive to save Dimity and Pillover. Naturally, chaos ensues, as not only are they causing all sorts of chaos, but also Pickleman, Madame Spatuna, and Felix all show up as well, just proving that almost anything can happen. And of course, they do manage to escape with Dimity and Pillover and Bumbersnoot, because they did get him back from Madame Spatuna, and it seems like all will be well. The book ends with a little endnote where we find out that Soap kisses Sophronia, and Monique will not be returning to Mademoiselle Geraldine's now that she has come out into society, and will be working for the Westminster Vampires. We also learn that unfortunately Professor Braithrope is still ill from his tether snapping, and that Vieve got into Bunsen's and could prove to be a possible scout. And so ends Curtsies and Conspiracies. So, as I'm sure you can tell, I absolutely loved this book from start to finish. I just could not keep my hands off of it. I tried to make it last as long as I could, so that I could be listening to it for a while, but ultimately, every time I sat down to listen to it, I would just listen to a huge chunk because it just is so captivating. Whoever said that this was like a steampunk Harry Potter, I think they got that pretty much right in the way that it's set up, because I know that there are more than just 3 books. A fourth one has been announced, so I think it's going to kind of follow like in a Harry Potter or Percy Jackson style, where it kind of follows her through her adventures until she graduates from the finishing school, which I find very exciting because I can't wait to see what happens as she gets a little bit older, and it's gonna be really fun. I loved that this book had more romance. I loved how jealous Soap would get of Felix, and I absolutely adore Felix and Sophronia's relationship. I did forget to mention that Sophronia catches the eye of one of the Westminster vampires, and he somewhat courts her as well. I'm not sure where that's going to be going yet, but I'm sure that's going to play a huge role in one of the next few books. I can't possibly say where the next book will take us, but I have already downloaded it. I'm all ready to listen to it, so that will be what I am starting next. I am currently reading the second book in the Seven Wonders series, Lost in Babylon. I am liking it just as much as the first one. It is slow going because I will be starting a summer class soon, and I don't know when I'll be able to get my hands back on a real book. So waistcoats and weaponry will probably be next on my review list. But after I finished Lost in Babylon, the next actual book I will be reading is called A Wicked Thing. It's kind of a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, and I am very excited for that. So, tell me, dear listeners, did you guys read this book? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Please let me know. I'm sure I angered a lot of people by saying that I wholeheartedly am Team Felix, but what can I say? He is just totally swoon worthy. I mean, come on. You gotta admit that he made you swoon. I know it's true. But anyway, go ahead and let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time.